The fever had taken Kade Lawson so quietly, he did not realize he was dying until he woke to the sound of someone stirring a pot in his kitchen. His cabin swam in and out of focus, the rough-hewn beams overhead blurring like they were underwater. He tried to sit up, and his lungs screamed, a wet, rattling cough tearing through his chest that left him gasping and trembling. The room spun. His last clear memory was finishing the day's work on the bridge foundation, his hands aching from chiseling limestone in the cold spring rain, then stumbling home as the sun set. That had been yesterday, or maybe 3 days ago. Time had become slippery. The smell of broth reached him. Rich, meaty, real. Footsteps crossed the floor, not the heavy boots of Henrik from town or the light tread of Marta who sometimes brought him bread. These were careful steps, hesitant, like someone walking into a place they were not certain they belonged. Kade forced his eyes open. The figure standing beside his bed was green. For a moment he thought the fever had conjured her. Orc woman, young, holding a wooden bowl that steamed gently in the dim light filtering through his window. She wore a patched wool dress too thin for the lingering cold, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her amber eyes watched him with an expression somewhere between worry and determination. "You need to drink this," she said. Her voice was low, steady. "You have been sick 3 days. Your chimney stopped smoking yesterday." Kade tried to speak, but only managed another racking cough. She set the bowl on the small table beside his bed and helped him sit up with surprising gentleness, propping his thin pillow behind him. Up close, he could see the fine details his fever-addled brain had missed. She was not tall, maybe a few inches shorter than his own 6 feet. Her build was feminine but strong, the kind of strength that came from hard work rather than bulk. There were calluses on her hands. "Who are you?" He managed, his voice a ruined rasp. "Tanna, from the river camp." She lifted the bowl. "Can you hold this, or should I help you?" His hands shook when he reached for it. She kept her own hands steadied beneath the bowl, letting him maintain the dignity of feeding himself while making sure he would not spill. The broth was perfect. Bone-deep richness with herbs he could not name, hot enough to ease the ache in his throat. "Why?" he asked between careful sips. "Because dying alone is a terrible thing." Tanna settled onto the wooden stool beside his bed. "And because you are building the bridge." Kade looked at her properly then, forcing his eyes to focus through the fever haze. The river camp. He knew of it. Everyone in the settlement did. A cluster of orc families living in hide tents and ramshackle huts a mile upstream, survivors from the border wars who had nowhere else to go. The town tolerated them because they caused no trouble and stayed out of sight. He had seen them occasionally when he scouted the river for the bridge site, but they had always kept their distance. "The bridge is not finished," he said. "I know. That is why you cannot die yet." She said it plainly, like stating a simple fact. Despite everything, despite the fever burning through him and the wet rattling in his lungs that he recognized from men he had seen die in the war, Kade almost smiled. Practical. Yes. Tanna took the bowl when he had emptied it. "Now sleep. I will bring more in a few hours. You are leaving." "I will come back." She stood, smoothing her dress. "I have herbs steeping, and you need rest more than company." "Wait." Kade caught her wrist, his grip weak. "Why are you doing this?" Tanna looked down at where his hand circled her wrist, pale against green. When she met his eyes, there was something in her expression he could not read. "The old ford washed out 2 winters ago. Your bridge will let us cross safely. That matters." She eased her wrist free and left, her footsteps careful on the wooden floor. Kade listened to her move around his kitchen, banking the fire, rinsing the bowl. Then the door opened and closed, and he was alone again with only the fever for company. He slept. When he woke again, the light had changed, and Tanna was back, this time with a cup of something that smelled bitter and green. She helped him drink it without comment, then brought more broth. He managed half the bowl before exhaustion dragged him under again. The pattern repeated. He would surface from fever dreams to find her there, patient and quiet with food or medicine, or sometimes just a cool cloth for his burning forehead. She never stayed long. She never spoke much. But she was always there when the fever peaked and he thought his lungs might finally give out, her hands steady and her voice calm. Breathe slowly. In through your nose. The coughing will pass. Let it come. Drink this. I know it tastes like river mud, but it will help. On the fourth day, Kade woke clear-headed for the first time. The fever had broken sometime in the night, leaving him weak as a newborn, but finally, blessedly able to think straight. Thin morning light filled the cabin. Tanna sat on the stool beside his bed, darning a sock that looked 3 times mended already. She noticed him watching and set the darning aside. How do you feel? Like I was trampled by a plow horse. Kade's voice was still rough but recognizably his own, but alive. Good. She stood and moved to the kitchen, returning with yet more broth and a piece of hard bread softened in it. Eat slowly. Your stomach will be sensitive. Kade obeyed, and only when he had finished did he let himself really look at her in the clear light of day. She looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes and her dress had a new stain on the sleeve. Have you been here every day? Yes. The whole day, most of it. Tanna collected the bowl. Your fever was high. Someone needed to watch. You barely know me. She paused, her back to him. I know you work alone on the bridge every day. I know you measure twice before every cut. I know you use the old methods, the ones that last. She turned to face him. I know the bridge matters to you. That is enough. Kade felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with his healing lungs. Thank you, he said quietly. I mean it. You saved my life. Tanna's expression flickered, something uncertain crossing her face. You would do the same. I do not know if I would have, Kade said honestly. I am not sure I would have noticed the smoke stopping. She studied him for a long moment, those amber eyes serious. Then she nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. You need to rebuild your strength. Can you stand? I can try. It took 3 attempts and Tanna's steadying arm, but he made it upright. His legs shook. The room tilted dangerously, but he was standing and that felt like a victory. Good, Tanna said. Tomorrow we will try walking. Your muscles need to remember how. Bossy, Kade said, but there was no heat in it. Practical, she corrected, and he caught the smallest hint of humor in her tone. Over the next week, Kade learned what it meant to be cared for by someone who approached nursing with the same methodical determination he brought to masonry. Tanna arrived each morning before dawn and stayed until evening, coaxing him through exercises that left him sweating and breathless, feeding him meals calculated to rebuild strength, bullying him into drinking foul-tasting teas that nonetheless worked exactly as she promised. She also talked finally, not much at first, but gradually more as he recovered. Where did you learn healing? Kade asked one afternoon as she wrapped his chest with cloth steeped in something that smelled of pine and made breathing easier. My mother. She was a healer in the clans before the war. Tanna's hands were gentle as she tied off the wrapping. She died during the crossing south. Fever like you had. I am sorry. It was 6 years ago. Tanna sat back, but thank you. Kade wanted to ask more, but she changed the subject with the smooth ease of someone who had practiced deflecting. Tell me about the bridge. Why stone and not wood? He knew what she was doing but allowed it. Wood rots. The river floods every spring when the mountain snow melts. A wooden bridge would last maybe 10 years if we were lucky. Stone will last generations. Is that important to you? The lasting. Kade looked out the window toward where the bridge waited, half-built. Yes, he said simply. Tanna followed his gaze. The old ford is where your betrothed died. The town midwife told me when I asked about you. The words hit like a fist. Kade went very still. Marta talks too much. She only said what everyone knows. Tanna's voice was quiet. I am sorry, I should not have mentioned it. No, it is. Kade took a careful breath. It is all right. It was 5 years ago. That does not mean it stops hurting. He looked at her then, this orc woman who had appeared in his life like an answer to a question he had not known to ask. No, he agreed, it does not. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, a spring bird called. Her name was Clara, Kade heard himself say. We were going to be married that summer. She was crossing the ford to visit her sister and the water was higher than it looked. The current took her. He flexed his hands, remembering. I tried to reach her. I got these. He held up his left hand, showing the scars across his palm where the rocks had torn him. But not her. Tanner reached out and took his scarred hand in both of hers, turning it gently in the light. She traced the old wounds with careful fingers. The bridge will save others. That is what I tell myself. Kade's throat felt tight. Some days I even believe it. You believe it today? He considered the question seriously. Today I believe I need to finish it. The believing can come later. Tanner released his hand. That is fair. They did not speak of it again, but something had shifted between them. Some wall had come down. By the end of the second week, Kade could walk the length of the cabin without stopping. By the third, he could manage the path to the woodshed and back. His strength returned in increments, slower than he wanted but steady. And always Tanna was there, patient and relentless, pushing him exactly as far as he could go and not an inch further. You are a good nurse, he told her one evening as she prepared to leave. A good healer. Tanna paused at the door. I am adequate. My mother was good. You saved my life. That seems better than adequate. She turned to look at him, framed in the doorway with the setting sun behind her. You are easy to save. You want to live. You have something to finish. Her expression was unreadable. That makes all the difference. After she left, Kade stood at the window and watched her figure grow smaller as she walked the path back toward the river camp. He realized with a start that he knew her walk now, the particular rhythm of her stride. Knew the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Knew the tiny furrow that appeared between her brows when she was worried but trying not to show it. He recognized with a lurch of something that might have been panic or might have been something else entirely, going to miss her when he was well enough that she stopped coming. The next morning, Kade woke to find Tanna already in the kitchen. But instead of preparing breakfast, she was studying the plans for the bridge that he kept rolled on the table. She looked up when she heard him rise, startled. I am sorry. I should not have looked without asking. It is fine. Kade joined her at the table, moving slowly but without assistance. What do you think? Tanna looked back down at the drawings. I think it is beautiful, and I think it is a lot of work for one man. It is going slowly, Kade admitted. Slower than I planned. The foundation took longer than I expected, and then the fever. He trailed off. How long until you can work again? A few more days maybe. A week to be safe. The thought made him restless. Every day not working was a day closer to the next spring flood. A day the bridge sat unfinished. I am behind schedule. Tanna traced one of the arches with a careful finger. Could someone help you? An assistant? I cannot afford to pay anyone. The town council funded the materials but not labor. That is why I am doing it alone. What if someone worked without pay? Kade looked at her. What are you saying? I am saying I have 2 hands and a strong back. I am saying I watch you study those plans like they are holy text, and I think maybe I could learn. Tanna met his eyes. I am saying the bridge matters to my people too, and I want to help finish it. Do you know anything about masonry? No, but I can learn. You can teach me. Kade studied her, the set of her jaw, the determination in her amber eyes. He thought about the past 3 weeks, the casual competence with which she had organized his sick room, managed his recovery, anticipated his needs. You are serious. Yes, the work is hard. Heavy stone, long days. I know hard work. The town might not like it. An orc working on their bridge. Something flickered across Tanna's face. Let them complain. Will they complain enough to stop paying for materials, enough to find another mason? She had him there. Kade was the only bridge builder within 50 miles, and the council knew it. They would grumble, but they needed the bridge finished more than they needed to indulge prejudice, probably. Why? He asked. Really? You have already done more than anyone could ask. You do not owe me anything. Tanna was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. My father drowned in the old ford 3 winters ago. He was crossing to trade furs in town and the ice broke under him. She looked down at the plans. You are building this bridge so no one else drowns. That is not a debt. That is a gift. I want to help give it. Kade felt his throat tighten. I am sorry about your father. I know. She looked up. So will you teach me? He should say no. It was complicated enough building a bridge alone without taking on an apprentice, especially one with no experience. It would slow him down, at least at first. And Tanna was right that the town might object. But Kade found himself looking at her and thinking about the past 3 weeks, about capable hands and quiet determination, about someone who noticed when chimney smoke stopped and cared enough to do something about it, about how the cabin had felt less like a cave to hide in and more like a home with her in it. Yes, he heard himself say, I will teach you. Tanna's face transformed. The smile was small, but it lit her whole expression, and Kade felt something in his chest squeeze tight. When do we start? She asked. Tomorrow, if the weather holds. Kade rolled up the plans carefully. Wear clothes you do not mind ruining. Stone dust gets into everything. I will be ready. She was. When Kade made his way slowly down to the bridge site the next morning, legs still not quite steady, Tanna was already waiting. She had traded her patched dress for worn trousers and a man's shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and her hair was bound back in a tight braid. She looked nervous and excited and very young. The bridge waited for them, patient as stone. Kade had completed the foundations on both banks and the first few courses of the near arch before the fever took him. Now limestone blocks sat in neat stacks, waiting to be lifted and set and mortared into place. The river ran quick and high with snowmelt, brown with spring sediment. First lesson, Kade said. Safety. The river is dangerous. We work tethered when we are over the water always. We check our ropes every day before we start. We do not take chances. Clear, clear. Second lesson. The stone tells you where it wants to go. You learn to listen to it. He picked up one of the cut blocks, turning it so she could see the grain. See how the layers run. That is your guide. Set it wrong and it will crack under pressure. Set it right and it will hold for centuries. Tanna leaned in, studying the stone with focused attention. How do you know which way is right? Practice. Trial. Error. Kade set the block down. Mostly error when you are learning. That is why we start with the less critical pieces. He spent the morning teaching her the basics. How to mix mortar to the right consistency. How to lift heavy stones without destroying your back. How to set a block level and true, testing it from every angle before the mortar set. Tanna listened with fierce concentration, asking questions that told Kade she was actually thinking about the principles beneath the techniques. She was also stronger than she looked. Not strong enough to lift the largest blocks alone, but then neither was Kade these days. They worked together, finding a rhythm. Him calling the placement, her steadying the stone while he checked the level and made minute adjustments. By midday they had set 3 blocks. It was slow work, but the placements were good, solid. Kade felt the familiar satisfaction of a job done right. "We should stop," Tanna said, watching him closely. "You are tired. I am fine. You are 3 weeks out from almost dying. We should stop." Kade wanted to argue, but she was right. His hands had started shaking again and his lungs ached. "Fine, but we come back tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Tanna agreed. They fell into a pattern. Every morning they met at the bridge site. Every morning Kade taught and Tanna learned, her skills growing with a speed that surprised him. She had good hands and a good eye, and she approached masonry with the same methodical care she had brought to nursing. Within a week, she could set a block nearly as well as he could. Within 2, she was anticipating the next step before he called it. They talked while they worked. "Not constantly, but enough. Why did you become a bridge builder?" Tanna asked one day as they wrestled a particularly stubborn block into alignment. "I was a soldier before," Kade said. "Spent 10 years building fortifications and siege works. Learned stone work there, and after I saw enough things destroyed, I wanted to build something that lasted, something useful." He tapped the level against the stone. "Perfect. Mark it." Tanna marked the position with chalk while Kade prepared the mortar. "Do you miss it, the army?" "No," the answer came quick and certain. "I miss some of the men I served with, but the work itself?" "No, because of the destruction. Because soldiers build temporary things, walls that will be knocked down, bridges that will be burned. I wanted to make something permanent." He spread mortar with practiced efficiency. "Something that would matter after I was gone." Tanna helped him lift the block into place. "The bridge will matter, if we finish it before the floods come." Kade checked the alignment, made a minute adjustment. "How much time do we have?" 6 weeks maybe. 7 if we are lucky." Tanna held the block steady while the mortar began to set. The snowpack was heavy this year. When it melts, she did not need to finish. They both knew what spring floods could do to unfinished work. "Then we had better work fast," Kade said. They did. Days blurred together in a haze of stone dust and aching muscles. The bridge grew. First the near arch, curving up from its foundation stone by careful stone. Then the far arch, Kade wading through the shallows to mark the placements while Tanna called measurements from the bank. Then the keystone, the final piece that would lock the arches together and make the bridge a bridge instead of 2 incomplete curves. It was Tanna who set the keystone, under Kade's direction. Her hands shook as she positioned it, but her face was set with concentration. When it settled into place, perfect and true, she looked at Kade with an expression of such joy that he had to look away. "Good work," he managed. "We did good work," she corrected. "Together." The bridge deck came next. Flat stones carefully fitted and mortared, creating a surface that would bear the weight of wagons and cattle and people crossing to safety. They worked side by side, Kade fitting the stones while Tanna mixed mortar and carried supplies, trading off when his strength flagged. It was during one of these trades, Kade resting while Tanna set a section of decking, that Henrik showed up. Kade knew trouble the moment he saw the town foreman's expression. Henrik was a practical man, not given to prejudice for its own sake, but he answered to the town council and the council was less practical. "Kade, need a word." Kade stood, dusting stone powder from his hands. "Henrik, what brings you out?" Henrik's eyes tracked to Tanna, who had paused in her work. "Heard you took on help." "That is right. Tanna is my assistant." "Your orc assistant." Henrik's tone was carefully neutral. "My assistant," Kade repeated, "who has been instrumental in keeping the project on schedule." "Council is not happy about it." "The council can be unhappy all they want. They hired me to build a bridge. I am building it. How I do that is my business." Henrik sighed. Kade, be reasonable. You know how people are. An orc working on a town project, it does not sit right. What does not sit right is people drowning in that ford, Kade said, his voice going hard. Which is what will keep happening if the bridge is not finished. Tanna is helping me finish it. That is all that matters. Is it, though? Henrik glanced at Tanna again. Because from where the council sits, it looks like you are spending town funds to train up an orc in masonry. They are wondering what she is really learning, what she might do with those skills. Kade felt heat rise in his chest. What exactly are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you what the council is saying. They are talking about bringing in another mason, someone who will work proper. There is no other mason within 50 miles, and they know it. There is Dalton over in Riverhead. He did the mill works last year. Dalton is a carpenter who can stack bricks. He does not know bridge building. If they bring him in, this project will fail. Kade stepped closer. And people will die. Is that what the council wants? Dead neighbors so they can maintain their prejudice? Henrik held up his hands. I am just the messenger, Kade. I think you are doing good work, but I need you to understand the position. Either the orc goes or they start looking at other options. Her name is Tanna. What? Her name is Tanna Zarek, not the orc. Tanna, Kade's jaw was tight. And she is the only reason this bridge is on track to finish before flood season. So you go back to the council and you tell them that if they want their bridge, it comes with Tanna. Those are the terms. Henrik studied him for a long moment. You are sure about this? Completely. All right. Henrik nodded slowly. I will tell them. But Kade, you are burning goodwill here. Make sure it is worth it. After Henrik left, Kade stood staring at the river. His hands were shaking, and it had nothing to do with residual weakness. Behind him, he heard Tanna's footsteps. You did not have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. They could replace you, they could try. Kade turned to face her, but they will not, because I am right and Henrik knows it. The council will complain and bluster, but in the end, they will accept it because they want the bridge more than they want to make a point. Tanna's expression was complicated. And if you are wrong, then I am wrong, but I will not throw you away to make them comfortable. The words came out more intense than he meant them. You have earned your place here. You have earned the right to help finish what you started. It is your bridge, Kade. No. He looked at the growing span, the stone arches reaching across the water. It is ours. We built it together. Something shifted in Tanna's face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Thank you, she finally said, and her voice was unsteady. Kade nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They stood there for a moment, the river rushing beneath them and the bridge waiting above. We should get back to work, Tanna said eventually. Yes, we should. They worked until sunset, and if they did not talk much, the silence between them felt different now, charged somehow, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. That night Kade lay awake in his cabin, staring at the ceiling beams. He tried to tell himself that his defense of Tanna was about principles, about fairness and justice, and not letting prejudice win. And those things were true, but they were not the whole truth. The whole truth was that the cabin felt empty when Tanna was not in it. The whole truth was that he found himself listening for her footsteps in the morning, found himself watching the path for her approach. The whole truth was that, when she smiled at him over a perfectly set stone, his chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with his healing lungs. The whole truth was terrifying. Kade had not thought of anyone that way since Clara. Had not wanted to. His heart had been a stone for 5 years, cold and closed and safe. Now Tanna had somehow worked into the cracks with her practical kindness, and her quiet determination, and her hands that could gentle a fever or set a foundation stone with equal skill. He was falling for her. Had maybe already fallen, And that was impossible. She was orc, he was human. The whole town was already up in arms about her working on the bridge. What would they do if they knew he was developing feelings? What would Tanna do if she knew? Kade rolled over, pulling the blanket up. He would ignore it. They would finish the bridge, and then she would return to her life at the river camp, and he would return to his, and everything would go back to how it was supposed to be. The thought made his chest ache worse than the fever ever had. The next morning, Tanna arrived to find Kade already at the bridge site, working with a fierce determination that made her stop and study him. Something had changed. He was more closed off, more focused on the work to the exclusion of everything else. "Good morning," she offered. "Morning." Kade did not look up from the stone he was measuring. "We need to pick up the pace. I want the decking finished this week." "That is ambitious." "It is necessary. We are running out of time." They worked in near silence, Kade calling curt instructions and Tanna following them with growing concern. This was not the patient teacher of the past weeks. This was someone running from something. By midday she had had enough. "Stop," she said. Kade did not pause in his work. "We cannot afford to stop. We need to," I said. "Stop." Tanna put herself between him and the next stone. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, we just need to focus." "You have been focused. This is different. This is running." She crossed her arms. "What happened?" Kade finally looked at her, and Tanna saw something raw in his eyes before he shuttered it away. "Nothing happened. I am just trying to make sure we finish before the floods. You are lying." "Tanna, please, let it go." "No." She stepped closer. "The last month we have worked together. We have talked. We have built something beautiful together. You defended me to the town foreman. And now you will not even look at me, so tell me what I did wrong." "You did not do anything wrong." The words burst out of Kade before he could stop them. "You are perfect, and that is the problem." Tanna went still. "What?" Kade dragged a hand through his hair, leaving tracks in the stone dust. "Forget I said that." "No, explain it." "I cannot." "Why not?" "Because," Kade's voice cracked. "Because you are you and I am me, and this is already complicated enough without me making it worse by—" He stopped, jaw clenching. Tanna's heart was hammering. "By what?" Kade looked at her, and she saw it then, clear in his face. The longing, the fear, the same tangle of feelings that had been growing in her own chest for weeks. "Oh," she said softly, "I am sorry." Kade took a step back. This was inappropriate. "You have been nothing but kind and professional, and I have no right to, Kade, burden you with this. We will finish the bridge and then—" "Kade." Tanna grabbed his arm, stopping the flow of words. "I feel it too." He went absolutely still. "What?" "I feel it too," she repeated, quieter. "I have been trying not to, but I do." They stood frozen, hands touching, the river loud in the sudden silence between them. "This is a terrible idea," Kade said finally. "Yes. The town already hates that you are working on the bridge. If they knew, I know. Your people might not approve either. Human and orc it is, I know." Tanna squeezed his arm gently. "I know all of it, and I am still telling you how I feel." Kade searched her face. "Why?" "Because you almost died and I realized I could not bear it. Because you defended me when you did not have to. Because when you look at the bridge you built, your face goes soft, and I want you to look at me like that." She paused. "Because you are a good man, and that is rare and precious." "I am nothing special," Kade said roughly. "You are to me." The words hung between them. Kade reached up slowly and cupped her face with one scarred hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I loved someone once. She died because I could not save her. I swore I would never." His voice broke. "I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of caring again. Of losing again. Of leaving things unfinished." He looked toward the bridge. "That is why I have to complete this, not just because people need it. Because I need to know I can finish what I start, that I can build something that lasts." Tanna understood then. The desperate focus. The long hours. the way he checked every measurement twice. This was not just a bridge. This was penance and proof and promise all bound together in stone. "Then we will finish it," she said firmly. "Together. And whatever happens after, we will face it together too, if you want." "I want," Kade whispered. "God help me, I want." Tanna rose on her toes and kissed him, gentle and deliberate. Kade made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss with a hunger that spoke of 5 years alone. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Well," Tanna said shakily. "That happened." Kade laughed, the sound surprised out of him. "Yes, it did. The bridge is still not going to build itself." "No, it is not." But Kade was smiling now, really smiling, and Tanna felt something in her chest expand and warm. They went back to work. But now, when their hands brushed passing stones, there was intention behind it. Now, when they caught each other's eyes across the bridge span, there was acknowledgement. The work went faster somehow, lightened by the truth spoken aloud. That evening, as they cleaned tools, Kade said carefully, "We should keep this quiet. For now." Tanna nodded. "I agree. The bridge needs to be finished first, after." She trailed off, "After we will figure it out." Kade set down the hammer he had been wiping clean. "Together." "Together," Tanna echoed, and the word felt like a promise. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of focused labor. They worked from first light to dusk, racing the calendar and the river. The bridge deck grew stone by stone, the gap across the water shrinking. Spring deepened around them. The trees leafed out. Wildflowers bloomed along the riverbank, and the snowpack in the mountains continued its slow, inevitable melt. They kept their changed relationship quiet as planned, but it colored everything. The way Kade's hand would linger on Tanna's shoulder when he checked her work. The way Tanna would steady him when exhaustion made him sway. Small touches, stolen glances, the occasional kiss when they were certain no one was watching. It was Tanna who noticed Kade pushing too hard. "You need to rest," she said one evening when his hands had been shaking for the past hour. "We are almost done, just a few more stones. You are exhausted. Your lungs are not fully healed. If you collapse again, I will not collapse." "Kade." Tanna took the trowel from his hand. "Please, rest. One day will not matter." "Every day matters." The words came out harsh. "Every day the water rises. Every day we are racing against time to finish before." He stopped, breathing hard. "Before it is too late, before I fail again." The unspoken words hung between them. "We will finish," Tanna said quietly. "I promise you we will finish. But not if you work yourself to death." Kade looked at the bridge, so close to completion, then back at Tanna. "You are right. I know you are right. Then listen to me." She touched his face gently. "Go home. Eat, sleep. Tomorrow we will finish the last section together." He went, reluctantly, and Tanna watched him go with worry tight in her throat. She understood the fear driving him. The need to complete this thing that had become tangled up with grief and guilt, and the determination to build something that would not wash away. But she was afraid he would burn himself out before the bridge was done. The next morning proved her fears unfounded. Kade arrived at the site clear-eyed and steady, and they worked with a focus that felt almost meditative. Stone by stone, the final section came together. By midday they were down to the last few pieces. By mid-afternoon it was done. Tanna set the final stone and stepped back. The bridge stretched across the river, solid and complete, its arches perfect curves that seemed to grow naturally from the banks. "It is finished," she said, and her voice shook. Kade stood beside her, staring at what they had built. Yes, it is finished. They had done it. Together they had built something that would last, something that would save lives, something beautiful. Kade felt the knot in his chest that had been there for 5 years finally loosen. Not disappear, the grief never fully disappeared, but loosen enough that he could breathe around it. Clara would have liked it. he said softly. She always wanted the town to build a proper crossing. Tanna slipped her hand into his. Then we built it for her too. Kade squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching voices. They stepped apart quickly as a group from town crested the hill. Henrik led them, followed by several council members and what looked like half the settlement. "Well," Henrik called as they approached. "Rumor said you were nearly done, thought we would come see for ourselves." Kade gestured to the bridge. "See for yourself, complete and ready for crossing." The council members walked the span carefully, testing the stones, running their hands over the joints. Kade watched them with his heart in his throat. Let them find fault now after everything. But the chief counselor, a stern woman named Iris, nodded slowly. "Fine work. Very fine work indeed." She looked at Kade. "You have done the town a service. Thank you." Iris's gaze shifted to Tanna. "Both of you, it seems. Henrik tells me the orc woman here is responsible for half the masonry." "More than half by the end," Kade said firmly. "Tanna is a skilled mason. This bridge would not have been completed on schedule without her. Is that so?" Iris studied Tanna with sharp eyes. "What is your name, girl?" "Tanna Zarek, madam. You did good work, Tanna Zarek." Iris turned back to the council. "I think that merits recognition and payment." Murmuring broke out among the council. Kade spoke up quickly. "Tanna worked as my apprentice and assistant. Any payment should be split." Iris interrupted. "The council authorized funds for labor if needed. Seems to me it was needed. We will draw up the accounting." Tanna looked stunned. "That is not necessary. I did not work for payment." Nevertheless, Iris's expression was not warm, but it was fair. "You earned it. The council pays its debts." Kade caught Tanna's eye and saw his own surprise reflected there. They had expected resistance, complaints, grudging acknowledgement at best. Not this. Maybe people could surprise you. Maybe they were not all locked into prejudice. Or maybe a well-built bridge spoke louder than assumptions. Henrik clapped Kade on the shoulder. "The town is planning a celebration for the opening. 3 days from now, once we have the railings installed, you will both be guests of honor." "Railings?" Kade asked. "Wooden rails on the sides for safety. The carpenter is handling it. Your part is done." Henrik grinned. "You can finally rest." Rest. The concept felt foreign. Kade had been pushing toward this moment for so long he had not thought about what came after. The crowd dispersed eventually, leaving Kade and Tanna alone with the bridge. The sun was setting, painting the stone gold and rose. "Guests of honor," Tanna said wonderingly. "I did not expect that, neither did I." Kade reached for her hand, emboldened by the privacy. "Tanna, we need to talk about what happens now." She turned to face him. "I know, the bridge is finished. You do not have a reason to see me every day anymore. Is that what you want, for me to stop coming?" "No." The word came fierce and immediate. "The opposite. I want you to keep coming. I want to see you every day. I want—" He took a breath. "I want you to be part of my life, openly. If that is what you want too." Tanna's eyes were very bright. "It is what I want. But Kade, the town, will adjust or they will not. I am done hiding what matters to me to make others comfortable." He cupped her face with both hands. "You matter to me, more than their approval, more than anything." "I love you," Tanna whispered. "I did not mean to, but I do." Kade felt his heart, that stone he thought would never warm again, crack open completely. "I love you too, so much it terrifies me." They kissed there on the bridge they had built together, the river singing beneath them and the sunset painting the sky. When they pulled apart, Tanna was smiling. "What?" Kade asked. "I just realized. You recovered from the fever in a month, but your heart took longer." Kade laughed. "Much longer, but worth the wait." "Yes." Tanna laced her fingers with his. "Worth the wait." They stood together as the light faded, two people who had built something beautiful from stone and mortar and stubborn hope. The bridge would stand for generations, Kade knew. Long after they were gone, it would carry people safely across the water. But right now, in this moment, it carried just the two of them. And that was enough. 3 days later, the town gathered for the bridge opening ceremony. Someone had strung flowers along the new wooden railings, and the council had arranged for tables of food on both banks. It was a proper celebration, the whole settlement turning out. Kade stood with Tanna at the near end of the bridge, both of them cleaned up and wearing their best clothes. Tanna had borrowed a dress from her cousin, deep blue wool that brought out the amber of her eyes. Kade wore his one good shirt and the jacket he had not touched since Clara's funeral. It felt right to wear it now, like closing one chapter and opening another. Iris made a speech about the bridge's importance and the quality of the work. She acknowledged both Kade and Tanna by name to scattered applause. Then she turned to them. "Would you do the honors of the first crossing?" Kade looked at Tanna. She nodded. Together they stepped onto the bridge. Their bridge. Kade felt the solid stone beneath his feet, the perfect fit of every block, the strength of the arches. This would last. This would save lives. This was complete. They walked slowly, savoring the moment. Halfway across, Kade stopped and looked down at the rushing water. This was where Clara had died, more or less, where the old Ford had taken her and he had failed to hold on. But that was not all this place was anymore. Now it was where he had built something that would prevent others from suffering the same loss. Now it was where he had met Tanna, learned to trust again, learned to love again, the past and the future meeting in the middle of a stone bridge. "Are you all right?" Tanna asked softly. "Yes." Kade took her hand. "I am saying goodbye and thank you." She understood. She waited while he stood there, releasing old grief into the sound of the water. Then they continued to the far bank, where more people waited to cheer and congratulate. The celebration went long into the evening. People crossed and recrossed the bridge, marveling at its strength. Children ran across shrieking with delight. Wagons rolled over the deck with barely a creak. Kade accepted handshakes and thanks with quiet grace. Tanna stayed close, and he noticed that people were speaking to her now, not all warmly but civilly, acknowledging her part in the work. It was a start. As the sun set, Kade found himself standing with Henrik at the food tables. "You did good," Henrik said, raising a cup of cider. "For what it is worth, I think the council made the right call letting you work your way. Thank you." Henrik glanced over to where Tanna was talking with Marta and a few other town women. "So, you and the orc girl, that a thing now?" Kade stiffened. "Her name is Tanna, and yes, it is a thing." "Easy." Henrik raised his free hand. "I am not criticizing, just observing. People will talk, you know." "Let them talk. Fair enough." Henrik took a drink. "For what it is worth, she seems like good people. The way she took care of you when you were sick, that showed character. She saved my life, among other things." Henrik's expression turned sly. "I saw how you looked at her when you set that keystone. Man does not look at his apprentice like that." Kade felt his ears heat. "Is there a point to this conversation?" "Just that I am glad you found something good. After Clara, you closed yourself off. It is good to see you living again." Henrik clapped him on the shoulder. "Be happy, Kade, you earned it." After Henrik left, Kade stood watching Tanna laugh at something Marta said. His heart felt too large for his chest. How had this happened? How had a dying man and an orc girl with soup turned into this? But he knew how. Care and time and working toward something together. Small moments that built into something larger, the way individual stones became a bridge. Tanna caught him watching and smiled, excusing herself from the conversation to join him. "You look thoughtful," she said. "Just happy," Kade replied. "Happier than I have been in a long time." The bridge is beautiful. Everyone loves it. I meant happy about you. He took her hand, not caring who saw, about us. Tanna's smile went soft. Me too. They stood together watching the celebration, the bridge lit by torchlight and filled with people crossing safely from one side to the other. This was what Kade had wanted to build. Not just stone and mortar, but connection, safety, future. And somehow, in the building of it, he had found his own future standing beside him. The celebration wound down as full dark fell. People began drifting home, calling thanks and goodbyes. Kade and Tanna helped clean up, stacking dishes and dousing torches, until finally they were among the last few remaining. "Walk you home," Kade offered. Tanna hesitated. "My camp is the other direction from your cabin." "I know." Kade held out his hand. "Walk you home anyway." They walked through the spring darkness, following the river path toward the orc camp. It was farther than Kade had realized, a good mile upstream. The camp itself was modest, a cluster of hide tents and a few permanent structures, smoke rising from cook fires. People looked up as they approached. Kade saw wariness in some faces, curiosity in others. An older orc man, broad and graying, stood from where he had been tending a fire. "Tanna, you bring a guest." "Father, this is Kade Lawson, the bridge builder." Tanna's voice was steady, but Kade heard the tension beneath. "Kade, my father, Doran Zarek." Doran studied Kade with sharp dark eyes. "The bridge is finished then?" "Yes, sir. We completed it 3 days ago." Doran's gaze flicked to Tanna. "My daughter helped." "Your daughter did half the work," Kade said firmly. "She is a skilled mason." The bridge would not exist without her. Doran's expression was unreadable. "And now the work is done, you walk her home." "Why?" Kade met his eyes. "Because I wanted to. Because your daughter matters to me." "How much does she matter, father?" Tanna said, a warning in her voice. "It is a fair question." Doran crossed his arms. "A human man and an orc woman, people will not like it, from either side." "I know," Kade said. "I do not care. You say that now. But when the town turns on you, when your own people reject you, then they reject me. Tanna is worth it." Doran studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Good answer. Come, sit. We should talk properly." They sat by the fire and talked long into the night. Doran asked pointed questions about Kade's intentions, his plans, his understanding of what a relationship with an orc woman would mean. Kade answered honestly, aware of Tanna listening beside him. By the time he finally left to walk back to his cabin, Kade felt wrung out but hopeful. Doran had not given them his blessing, not exactly, but he had not forbidden it either. "That went better than I feared," Tanna said, walking him to the edge of camp. "Your father is protective. I respect that. He liked you. I could tell." "How could you tell?" "He barely changed expression the entire time." Tanna smiled. "He offered you food. He only does that for people he approves of." Kade pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I should go. It is late." "Stay," Tanna said impulsively. "We have a spare tent." "You could stay and walk back in the morning." Kade hesitated, tempted, but the camp was watching and he did not want to give anyone reason to question Tanna's honor. "Not yet, but soon, when we have things more settled." "When soon," he promised. I love you too." "Be safe walking back." Kade made his way through the darkness, the path lit by a half-moon and the distant memory of Tanna's lips. When he reached his cabin, it felt emptier than ever. He resolved to do something about that. The next morning he walked into town with a purpose. He found Henrik at the mill and pulled him aside. "I need advice," Kade said. "About? I want to ask Tanna to marry me, but I do not know the orc customs. What is appropriate? What should I do?" Henrik's eyebrows climbed. "You are serious about this, completely." "Well." Henrik scratched his beard. "I do not know much about orc marriage customs, but I know who might. Marta has a friend at the camp. They trade herbs. She could ask. Would she, for you? Probably. Marta has a soft spot for romance. Henrik was right. Marta was delighted to help and returned the next day with detailed information. Orc betrothals, she explained, involved the suitor presenting a gift that showed understanding of the beloved's skills and interests. Something personal, something meaningful. Kade knew immediately what to make. He spent the next week in his workshop, shaping a piece of limestone he had saved from the bridge materials. It was slow work, careful work, using skills he had not practiced since his army days. But gradually the stone revealed what was hidden inside, a pair of hands. One human, one orc. Clasped together. The detail was fine enough to show the calluses on both, the scars on the human palm. The stone was pale gold, warm in the light. It was not perfect. Kade could see the flaws in the carving, but it was honest. It was from the heart. He wrapped it carefully and walked to the river camp on a warm spring evening. Tanna met him at the edge, curiosity bright in her eyes. You have been scarce this week. I was working on something. Kade's hands were sweating. Is your father here? Yes, why? Then Tanna's eyes widened. Kade, what did you do? Nothing yet, but I would like to, with his permission. Tanna's hands flew to her mouth. Kade could see her blinking back tears. Doran emerged from his tent, took one look at them and sighed. I suppose you had better come in. Inside the tent, Kade knelt formally. His heart was hammering, but his voice stayed steady. Sir, I would like to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. Doran looked at Tanna. This is what you want. Yes, Tanna said, her voice shaking. More than anything. You understand what you are choosing, the difficulties you will face. We understand, Kade said, and we do not care. We want to face them together. Doran was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Show me what you brought. Kade unwrapped the stone carving, offering it with both hands. Doran took it carefully, turning it in the light. His expression softened. You made this? Yes, sir. It is fine work. You captured her hands exactly. Doran looked at Tanna. He knows you, daughter, sees you truly. I know, Tanna whispered. Doran handed the carving back to Kade. You have my permission and my blessing for what it is worth. Make her happy. I will spend my life trying, Kade promised. He turned to Tanna, holding out the carved stone. Tanna Zarek, will you marry me? Yes. Tanna took the carving with shaking hands, then threw her arms around Kade's neck. Yes, yes, yes. Kade caught her, holding tight, feeling her tears wet against his neck. His own eyes were burning. When they pulled apart enough to kiss, it tasted like salt and joy. Doran cleared his throat. I suppose we need to plan a wedding. Both ways, Tanna said, still clinging to Kade. Orc customs and human. I want both. Then both it is, Kade agreed. The wedding took place a month later on the bridge. It seemed fitting, marrying on the thing they had built together. The ceremony blended traditions from both peoples. An orc elder spoke the old blessings. Marta officiated the human portion, her eyes wet with happy tears. People came from both communities. Not everyone. Prejudice died hard on both sides. But enough. Enough to fill the bridge with witnesses. Enough to show that maybe, slowly, things were changing. Kade wore his best suit, the one from his army days altered to fit. Tanna wore a dress of green that matched her skin, sewn by women from both the camp and the town working together. She looked beautiful. She looked happy. When they spoke their vows, Kade's voice carried clear across the water. I promise to stand with you, to build with you, to finish what we start together, for as long as we both live. Tanna's voice was just as steady. I promise to care for you, to work beside you, to be your partner in all things, for as long as we both live. They sealed it with a kiss that got cheers from both sides. The celebration afterward was raucous and joyful, music and dancing and enough food for an army. Kade watched Tanna dance with her father, then with Henrik, then with half the camp and most of the town. She glowed with happiness. When she finally made her way back to him, breathless and laughing, Kade pulled her close. "Happy?" he asked, "impossibly happy." Tanna kissed him. "Are you more than I thought possible?" Kade rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you, for what? For bringing me soup. For saving my life. For teaching me how to live again." Tanna smiled. "Thank you for letting me help with the bridge, for trusting me, for loving me." "Always," Kade promised. They danced together as the sun set over the bridge, the same bridge where Kade had almost given up on everything. Where Tanna had first seen him working alone and decided he mattered. Where they had built something that would outlast them both. The bridge stood strong and true, its arches perfect curves against the sky. It would carry people safely across for generations. But right now, in this moment, it carried only Kade and Tanna and the promise of their future together. Later, much later, they walked to the cabin that was now their cabin. Kade had spent the past month making space for Tanna's things, adding shelves for her herbs and a workspace for her tools. She had brought her mother's healing books and her father's blessing and her own fierce heart. They stood together in the doorway, looking at the space that would be their shared home. "It is not much," Kade said. "It is perfect." Tanna squeezed his hand. "Because we are both in it." They went inside and closed the door on the world outside. Whatever challenges waited, they would face them together. Whatever bridges needed building, they would build them side by side. Kade pulled Tanna close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid realness of her in his arms. He had been so empty for so long, his heart a closed fist protecting old wounds. And then she had appeared with soup and stubborn kindness, and refused to let him die alone. She had saved him, not just from the fever but from the half-life he had been living. She had given him a reason to hope again. To trust again, to love again. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too," Tanna whispered back. "My stubborn mason." They held each other in the quiet cabin as night settled around them. Outside, the river flowed on toward the sea. The bridge stood strong. The world turned. And two people who had found each other against all odds made a home together, building their future the same way they had built the bridge. One day at a time. One stone at a time. One moment of trust and care and love at a time. The seasons turned. Summer came and went, hot and golden. Autumn followed, painting the trees red and gold. Winter arrived with snow that made the bridge's stone arches stand out stark and beautiful against white banks. Kade and Tanna settled into married life, with the same practical cooperation they had brought to bridge building. Mornings found them working together, Kade taking on repair jobs around the settlement, while Tanna established herself as a healer and sometime mason. Evenings they spent by the fire, talking and planning and simply being together. The town grew accustomed to them. Oh, there were still some who disapproved, who muttered about unnatural unions and mixing of kinds. But most people came around, won over by Tanna's skill with medicines and Kade's steady reliability. Hard to maintain prejudice against someone who set your broken arm or fixed your crumbling chimney. The river camp grew easier with them too. Doran became a frequent visitor to the cabin, bringing game from his hunts and staying for dinner. Other orc families followed his lead, tentatively at first but with growing comfort. Bridges, Kade reflected, were not just made of stone. Sometimes they were made of shared meals and small kindnesses, and the slow wearing down of old fears. Spring returned, bringing with it the annual floods. Kade and Tanna walked to the bridge the day the water peaked, watching the brown torrent rage beneath the stone arches. The bridge held firm exactly as designed. "Not a crack, not a tremor, it works," Tanna said with satisfaction. "Of course it works. We built it right." "We did not we?" She leaned against his shoulder. We build good things together. Kade wrapped an arm around her waist. Yes, we do. As they stood there watching the water that could not touch them, could not threaten them, Kade felt the last piece of old grief finally release its hold. Clara was gone, would always be gone, but she was at peace now in his memory, no longer a wound but a gentle ache. A reminder of love rather than a monument to loss, and in her place was Tanna, warm and solid and alive, choosing him every day the way he chose her. "What are you thinking?" Tanna asked. "That I am glad you noticed when my chimney smoke stopped." Tanna smiled. "Me too. That I am glad you brought me soup. It was good soup. It was terrible soup. You are a better mason than a cook." Tanna elbowed him. "It was not that bad. It was that bad, but it saved my life anyway." Kade turned her to face him. "You saved my life in every way that matters." "You saved mine too," Tanna said softly. "You taught me I could build things, that I mattered, that I deserved to be loved. You do, you are, you always will be." They kissed there on their bridge, the spring flood roaring harmlessly beneath them. When they pulled apart, Tanna's eyes were bright. "What?" Kade asked. "I have news. I was going to wait, but I cannot keep it in anymore." She took his hands, placed them on her stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Kade froze. "What, a baby? Due in autumn, I think. You are sure, very sure. I am a healer, remember." Kade let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled Tanna into his arms, holding her like she was made of spun glass. "A baby, we are having a baby." "Are you happy?" Tanna asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. "Happy." Kade pulled back enough to see her face. "I am terrified and thrilled and so happy I can barely breathe. A baby, our baby." "Yes." Tanna was smiling now, radiant. "Ours." They stood together on the bridge and planned for the future. A child who would be both and neither, human and orc, a bridge themselves between two peoples. A child who would grow up knowing both communities, both traditions. A child who would never have to choose. It would not be easy. There would be challenges, prejudice from both sides. But Kade and Tanna had faced challenges before. They knew how to build things that lasted. They knew how to work together. Summer arrived hot and lush. Tanna's belly began to show and the cabin filled with preparations. Marta helped sew tiny clothes. Doran carved a cradle from river oak. Women from both communities brought gifts and advice, creating a strange new community around the coming child. Kade found himself building again, this time an addition to the cabin. A room for the baby, with windows facing the bridge and the river beyond. Tanna supervised from the shade, calling corrections when he got measurements wrong. "You are enjoying this too much," Kade grumbled as he redid a window frame for the third time. "You are terrible at carpentry. Stick to stone." "I am very good with stone." "Yes, you are, but wood defeats you." Kade threw a wood shaving at her. She caught it and threw it back, laughing. They finished the room by midsummer. It was small but snug, with good light and space for a cradle and a chest for clothes. Kade painted the walls white while Tanna directed, her feet up because the healer from town had ordered rest. "I am not fragile," Tanna complained. "I know, but our baby needs you healthy, so rest." "Bossy." "Practical," Kade said, echoing her words from long ago. "I learned from the best." Autumn came painted in fire colors. The baby came with it, arriving on a cool September evening after a labor that left Kade pacing and useless, while Marta and an orc midwife named Shira managed everything. When he was finally allowed in, Tanna was sitting up in bed, exhausted and triumphant, holding a tiny bundle. Kade approached on shaking legs. "Meet your daughter," Tanna said softly. The baby was perfect. Green skin a shade lighter than Tanna's. Dark hair. Small tusks just visible. And when she opened her eyes, they were Kade's color, that same light gray. "She is beautiful," Kade whispered. "She is perfect. She is ours." Tanna held the bundle out. "Do you want to hold her?" Kade took his daughter with careful hands, terrified and awed. She was so small, so fragile, so completely his. "Hello, little one," he said. "I am your father." The baby yawned, unimpressed. Tanna laughed. "She is not scared of you at all. She will be when she is older and I start laying down rules. We will see about that." Tanna smiled tiredly. "What should we name her?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, holding his daughter, Kade knew. "Mara," he said. "After my mother, Mara Lawson." "Mara Lawson Zarek," Tanna corrected. "She gets both our names." "Mara Lawson Zarek," Kade agreed. "Welcome to the world, Mara." The baby settled against his chest, warm and trusting. Kade felt his heart, that organ that had been stoned for so long, overflow completely. He had thought he would never have this again. A family, a future, love that did not come wrapped in loss, but here it was, here they were. His wife and his daughter and a life he had built from ruins. "Thank you," he told Tanna. "For what?" "For everything. For soup and stubbornness and teaching me how to hope again. For this." He looked down at Mara. "For her?" Tanna reached up and took his hand. "Thank you for letting me in. For seeing me. For loving me. Always," Kade promised. "Forever." They sat together in the quiet cabin, new parents marveling at the tiny life they had created. Outside the window, the bridge stood strong stone arches spanning the river. Inside, a family began, built on a foundation of trust and care and love that had started with something as simple as soup brought to a sick man. Kade had recovered from the fever in a month. His heart had taken longer, but it had healed fully, completely, better than before. And now it beat not just for himself, but for Tanna and Mara. For the family they were building together, one day at a time. The story could have ended there, with the perfect image of new parents and new baby. But life was not a single moment frozen in amber. Life was days that became weeks, that became months and years. Mara grew. She learned to crawl, then walk, then run. She had her mother's determination and her father's careful precision. By the time she was 3, she was helping Kade sort stones by size, her small green hands serious about the task. "Good work," Kade told her as she placed a stone exactly right. "Like Mama?" Mara asked. "Just like Mama." More children followed. A son they named Kellen, then another daughter, Violet. The cabin expanded with them, rooms added one by one. It was never fancy, but it was full. Full of noise and love, and the controlled chaos of raising children. The bridge became a gathering place. Once a year the town held a festival there, celebrating the anniversary of its opening. Families came from both communities to cross and recross, to eat and dance and simply be together. The bridge that Kade and Tanna had built became a symbol of more than safe passage. It became a symbol of connection. Other things changed too. The river camp grew more permanent, hide tents giving way to log cabins. Trade increased between orc and human communities. Prejudice did not disappear. It never fully did, but it softened at the edges. Became something people could work around rather than an insurmountable wall. Kade and Tanna were part of that change, but not the whole of it. They were just two people who loved each other and refused to let anyone else's fears dictate their lives. But sometimes that was enough to crack the door open for others to follow. Doran grew old and passed peacefully in his sleep when Mara was 12. They buried him near the bridge, a simple stone marker that Kade carved himself. Tanna grieved, but not without comfort. She had her family around her. She had built a life her father could be proud of. Henrik retired from his position as foreman and recommended Kade as his replacement. Kade took the job and proved good at it, organizing projects and managing workers with the same methodical care he brought to masonry. Tanna worked beside him on many projects, the two of them a known quantity now. When you hired Kade Lawson, you got Tanna too, and you got work that would last. They built other bridges over the years. A small one over the creek north of town. A footbridge connecting two parts of the growing settlement. Each one solid and true and built to last. But their first bridge, the stone span over the river, remained special. That was where they had learned to trust each other, where they had fallen in love, where they had married. That bridge held their history in every stone. On their 20th anniversary they walked it together, just the two of them. The children were old enough to manage on their own for an evening. Kade and Tanna had snuck away like young lovers, leaving dinner preparations in Mara's capable hands. 20 years, Tanna said, leaning against the stone rail. That went fast and slow, Kade said, both at once. You remember when we set the keystone? I was so nervous my hands shook. I remember thinking you were remarkable, Tanna smiled. I thought you were insufferable, so serious about every tiny detail. Details matter. That is why this bridge has not needed repairs in 20 years. True. She turned to face him. We build good things. We do. Kade pulled her close. Best thing I ever built was a life with you. That was very romantic for a mason. I have my moments. They kissed there on the bridge, the same spot they had married, and Kade marveled at how lucky he was, how close he had come to missing all of this. If Tanna had not noticed his chimney smoke stopping, if she had not cared enough to check on him, if she had not brought soup to a sick man and then stayed to nurse him back to health, so many ifs, so many moments that could have gone differently, but they had not. They had gone exactly right. What are you thinking? Tanna asked, the same question she had asked 1,000 times over the years. That I love you, that I am grateful, that I would not change a single thing. Not one thing. Well, maybe I would have learned to cook better soup. So you did not have to carry that burden alone. Tanna laughed, the sound bright and free. Your soup is still terrible. Some things never change. I have other skills. Yes, you do. She kissed him again. Many valuable skills. They walked home hand in hand as stars began to appear overhead. The river sang its endless song beneath the bridge. Lights glowed warm in the cabin windows where their children waited. Kade Lawson had been a dying man once, fever-struck and alone in a dark cabin. He had been saved by an orc woman with terrible soup and a stubborn refusal to let him give up. He had recovered from the fever quickly enough. His heart had taken longer, wounded as it was by old grief and fear. But it had healed, completely and thoroughly, made new by love and trust and the daily choice to build something beautiful together. The man who walked home that evening was not the same man who had collapsed in his cabin all those years ago. He was better, fuller, more himself than he had ever been, and beside him walked the woman who had made that possible, who had brought soup and stayed, who had learned to build bridges of stone and of hope, who had chosen him every day for 20 years and would choose him for as many more as they were granted. They reached the cabin to find Mara had burned the bread and Kellen had gotten into a fight with Violet over something trivial. Normal evening chaos, normal family life. Kade and Tanna sorted it out with practiced ease, salvaging dinner and mediating peace. They ate together at the big table Kade had built, all 5 of them squeezed in close. Stories were told, plans were made, laughter rang out. After the children went to bed, Kade and Tanna sat together by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, comfortable and easy and home. Good day, Tanna asked. Very good day, Kade agreed. Good life, the very best life. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you for bringing me soup. Tanna smiled against his shoulder. Thank you for drinking it, even though it was terrible. It was terrible, Kade agreed, but it saved my life anyway. No, Tanna said softly. We saved each other. She was right. They had saved each other. Built each other up. made each other better and braver and more whole. That was what love did, Kade had learned. Real love. Not the tragic romance of poems, but the daily choosing of partnership and care. Love was bringing soup to a sick man. Love was teaching someone your craft. Love was defending them when the world was unkind. Love was building a life together, stone by stone, day by day, choice by choice. Love was a bridge, solid and true and built to last. And Kade Lawson, who had once thought his heart was stone, cold and dead and beyond repair, knew now that hearts could be rebuilt, could be made new, could heal and grow and overflow with joy. His had. Thanks to an orc woman named Tanna who had noticed when his chimney smoke stopped and cared enough to do something about it. The fire burned low. The night deepened. And in a cabin near a river spanned by a bridge that would outlast them both, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close and counted themselves blessed. The story ended there, in warmth and comfort and love. No tragedy, no cliffhanger. Just a life well lived and a love well earned. Just two people who had built something beautiful together and would keep building until their days were done. Just a bridge builder and his wife, settling into sleep in each other's arms, grateful for soup and stubbornness and second chances. Just a happily ever after, hard won and deeply cherished, just love.